Hi everyone, this is the video for some rebuttal ideas. Remember those from the last video, if you watch the first minute or so, there's some general tips on how you can rebuttal if you're thinking of other responses, and you can always use those arguments like no link to digital media, no impact, non-unique, there are other causes of these problems. But for this video, we'll just go on some specific arguments to the different advantages and disadvantages. And again, these are not exhaustive. These are just ones that sort of immediately came to mind for me. But you can always supplement and please do use evidence and your other case and your cases to also help your rebuttal. So for the interactivity advantage, I think first of all, pressing on the idea that interactivity doesn't necessarily mean good. I mean, you can have like toxic interactivity, you can have hateful interactivity, right? There's no, it's not good just because it's interactive. You can also argue that the digital media trades off with face-to-face communication, and face-to-face interactivity is a better thing than online interactivity. You can also use the community arguments from our last debates, the answers to community, that they're sort of fake community and they're not really genuine, and also mental health arguments, I think, to answer this as well. Right? If you're proving that spending time online harms mental health, then it sort of undercuts the idea that interactivity is a good thing. This can also, digital media can also increase passive consumption and just scrolling. I mean, what we do mostly with digital media is like watch videos and passively scroll. So there's not a whole lot of interactivity necessarily. And in fact, in some ways we might, because we have so much more access to Netflix and different things to consume passively, we might actually increase our passive consumption rather than increase interactivity. The second thing to rebut is the identity advantage. First of all, we can argue that this can lead to bad identity formation. You can get involved in like a white nationalist group, or I mentioned pro-anorexia websites, or you can become a troll. You can get involved with toxic communities of different kinds. There's incel communities that really formed online. There's the alt-right communities that formed online. So you can actually form your identity online, but end up in a place that's like a stressful or hateful identity formation. Things like bullying, hate speech, harassment online also can harm our identities. So that's an argument against it, as well as the mental health arguments, social comparison, depression, anxiety, those kinds of things that happen due to due to digital media. And there were other ways to find and form our identities before digital media, right? It's not like people were walking around identityless before digital media. So you can really press them on the link to the advantage, right? Like how much does digital media really benefit identity formation? There's the anonymity advantage and disadvantage. Since, there's both sides here, I'm not going to really spend a lot of time rebutting this. But there's advantages and there's disadvantages, so you can use the other side to help answer why anonymity or the disinhibition effect is a good thing or a bad thing. You can also argue that anonymity could happen before digital media. You could go to a bar and just kind of be a stranger, or ride on a public bus or something like that. So there were ways to get this anonymity before digital media. The hyper reality disadvantage. First, this is the idea that we kind of live in this fake world, this hyper real world instead of the real world. First of all, this critique came from a person named Jean Baudrillard, who was writing in the 1990s, which was and even the 1980s, which is well before digital media came around. So the world of like television and fashion magazines and things like that, there was also hyper reality then. You can also find authentic and real connections using digital media. Most of what we do these days is use digital media to enhance our interpersonal and face-to-face connections. So there's no reason to think it's only authentic and real connections. And I think you can argue that the cause of this is our culture. We have a hyper individualistic culture, and also capitalism that encouraged us to worry about our image and stuff like that. And it's not so much the fault of digital media. The affinity advantages, there are other ways to find affinity groups and affinity spaces before digital media. And this is really depends on the user much more so than the media, right? That, users can use it to find affinity spaces, or they can use it to, spread hate and harassment. And we should really be blaming the user more than digital media. The trade-off with face-to-face communication is an issue here too, right? It could be, face-to-face affinity groups can be stronger and more authentic than these ones online. And once again, there can be negative affinity groups online, hate groups, trolls, etc. For the love and relationships advantage, this can lead to relationship troubles too. I saw a study a few years back that said something like 60% of divorces had Facebook in the proceedings of the divorce. Like people stalk one another, they snoop on one another, they get jealous, they get insecure, those kinds of things. Also, one thing that happens because of digital media is that we have more relationships. So there's actually articles and evidence out there that says that, when you have 1,000 Facebook friends, you're actually kind of straining yourself thin and harming what should be a tighter circle of more intimate friends. There's arguments about why online dating is worse than just meeting someone serendipitously. And you could use the hyper reality arguments as well here to say that, we form more relationships and we form more love relationships, but it's sort of too image focused. You think about Tinder and stuff like that, where we're just looking for love based on a picture of someone, and maybe that's not the best approach to trying to find love. For the flaming, trolling, and hate disadvantage, I think you can say that this is a problem caused by users and not the media, right? Not everyone that uses digital media becomes a troll or joins a hate group. So, blame the users, not the media. This may be a problem of our culture and not the media as well, right? The fact that the world is burning, the fact that we have so much student loans and we have, debt and meaningless jobs and stuff like that turns people nasty. And that's the real cause of this problem. You can use your community arguments and your relationship arguments and stuff to answer this as well, to say that these things can also promote intimacy and connection. And we can find social support online. When someone's being harassed, there's harassment support groups. I mentioned the LGBTQ support groups and stuff, and online as well. And finally, I think you can argue that exposure is good. That when people are being hateful and trolling and whatever online, that exposure actually stops them, or isolates them and backfires. The cyberbullying disadvantage. Obviously, there was bullying before digital media, and we can make this kind of standby argument about this is the fault of the person and not the medium. And I think you can push them on the impact as well. How much of an impact is there to cyberbullying in comparison to bullying that occurred beforehand? So if you are making this disadvantage, trying to give us some evidence that it's increased and it has maybe more harmful effects will be really important. You could even argue that cyberbullying is less harmful than in-person bullying because there's no physical harm being done or whatever. And then finally, the mental health advantages or disadvantages. I'm not going to really go over this too much since I covered both advantages and disadvantages, and you can use the kind of flip side arguments to answer these mental health advantages or disadvantages. I think too, you can say the physical health, because there's a lot of evidence that says physical health is tied to mental health. So negative mental health or physical health effects of digital media include sitting too much, eye strain, lack of sleep, those kinds of things, obesity. And positive effects of digital media on health is better medical records, more access to medical technology, that kind of thing, Fitbits and stuff like that. Um, and so, you could use physical health arguments to help rebut the mental health because the two are tied. If you're sick physically or you have low energy, you're much more likely to have poor mental health as well. So that's all we've got for today. Hopefully that gives you a few ideas, and I look forward to reading your debates.